Good morning, everyone. What we'll do is we'll leave a little bit of time just for some of you to settle and hopefully log in okay. Myself and Sarah are here, hopefully on screen. So Sarah, if you want to give a little wave.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
My name's Leon. What we're going to do is we're going to start a presentation shortly. For those of you that have logged in, there are a few things just to be made aware of. So there's a Q&A section. So if you click on the right hand side, you'll see a button that says Q&A. If you have got any questions, then feel free to ask them on there. And we are doing a Q&A, myself and Sarah, at the end. So we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Give it a few more seconds just to make sure everyone's in. If you've got any issues, there's also a chat section. So feel free, if you've got any issues with your network or you can't hear for whatever reason, then please let us know. As you can imagine, on these webinars, we can't always control what happens. We do have dogs, sometimes issues with networks and things like that. So do bear with us. And if you can't or you do have any issues, then please let us know. So without further ado, my name's Leon. I'm part of the Solent Apprenticeship Hub. We've done a couple of these webinars already, so it might be that some of you have actually seen us already. And effectively what we're going to do today is we're going to cover CV and interview skills. Sarah is going to talk through a few slides about apprenticeships. So we do want to make this as relevant to the Solent Apprenticeship Hub as possible. So if you've got any questions about the CV side of things, then fantastic. If you've got questions about apprenticeships and what we actually do at the Solent Apprenticeship Hub, then equally that's amazing. So I will hand over to Sarah. You're then going to have me for the CV stuff a few slides in. And if you've got any questions, again, just use the Q&A.
Brilliant.
Over
Thanks.
to you, Sarah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I've got my handy assistant who's going to be clicking through the slides for me. So if we could just go to, that's the content. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Leon's going to do the second half, like he mentioned. He's going to talk a bit more about CVs, but I'm just going to talk to you very briefly, if you haven't joined us on one of these webinars before, about who we are at the Solent Apprenticeship Hub. So basically what we do is provide impartial advice and support and guidance for individuals like yourself, age ranging from 16 to 95. You could be anyone. If you're interested in apprenticeships, we can support you with that. We also deal with businesses. So if you know anyone who is struggling with any information about apprenticeships and who is a business at the moment who needs our advice, we can help you too. We're based across the whole of the Solent area. So if you don't know where that is, it's basically sort of Isle of Wight, Portsmouth, Southampton, New Forest. We do Eastleigh as well. So all of those areas sort of within that little Solent area we will cover. If you're joining us from outside of that area and you're panicking we can't help you, in this situation, we will help anyone and everyone. So please don't let that put you off asking us any questions or getting in touch. So the team has been around since February last year. The team is made up of people who have been involved in apprenticeships for years. We like to think we cover the whole spectrum of apprenticeships across the team. So we can deal with all kinds of sectors, all kinds of situations. We've been there, done that, basically. So no question is silly, basically, is what I would say. We can help you identify apprenticeship opportunities. So we can help you if you're starting from scratch and you don't know what might suit you. We can help you the whole journey. What apprenticeship? What is an apprenticeship? Right through to placing you with a training provider who might be able to support you with the job. It's all impartial advice. We work with training providers across the whole of the Solent area. So we will make sure it's the right apprenticeship, the right delivery, the right training provider, the right employer, and it's all impartial. So any queries, anything you've got, ask us at the end. Next slide. Nice. Okay, so what you're looking at here on this slide is the apprenticeships vacancy portal. So this is a government website. The best way to find it is by the link on the top there, but worst case scenario, and you don't get that, as you know, you can't take that in because I'm rubbish with websites. You can just type it into Google. So if you just type in find an apprenticeship, it will pop up, simple as that. Click on the link and you'll be taken to the homepage. And the first thing it will say to you is, do you want to create a login? Or it will say to you, do you want to search for apprenticeships in your area? So either way, if you're not ready to commit to making a login, just have a search. type in your postcode, type in a keyword. So for example, if you're interested in, I don't know, mechanics, type in mechanics, and it will pop up with all apprenticeship vacancies that are within the distance that you've put in. So if you're not happy traveling more than, say, 10 miles, put 10 miles in. What we will say at the moment is that you might be thinking there's not a lot of jobs at the moment because of what's going on with COVID-19. There are jobs. Last time I spoke to Leon about it, he said there's something like 200 vacancies in the sort of Hampshire area, the Solent area. So don't be put off. It's a really good time to look, especially if you're finishing school and you don't know what's going on, or if you're leaving college. Just have a look at that website. There's more than you think. Once you find a vacancy you're interested in, create that login. I can't express how important it is to create a login, because the more jobs you find, once you've got that login and you've got your profile, it's just a simple click. You adapt it to each job. So there'll be certain questions you'll have to answer about each job. But setting it up in the first place is, once you've done that, it's nice, quick and easy. Next slide, please, Tom. Wonderful. So some quick tips on how to apply. We always say, first thing is, if you're interested in the sector, ask your friends, your family, people around you that might know a bit more about that sector. Do they know people in the industry? It could be, for example, that you're interested in digital marketing and your parent's friend works in digital marketing. So that's suddenly a way for you to learn a lot more about the sector. And they might say, actually, thinking about it, I could do with, a digital marketing executive. Suddenly you might have an in where you didn't think you had. So always ask your friends and family. Approach local employers. So if you just type into Google jobs, say if go on Indeed, don't specifically look for apprenticeships, and just see if there's a job. So if there's an administration job and you're interested in administration, why not call that employer? Have a look. That job could be converted into an apprenticeship. If you don't want to do that and that concept scares you, that's what we're here for. So if you see a job that you're interested in and you think, oh, it doesn't say apprenticeship, get in contact with us. That might be something that we could have a chat with that employer for you, and it could end up being an apprenticeship. It could end up not being, but it's worth a shot. So just have a look at what's out there locally, both apprenticeships and normal jobs. So we're going to talk a lot about CVs. So sending out your CV is vital. I've had a lot of people in the past who want to do an apprenticeship and who have created their apprenticeship login, and they think that that's sort of all that they need to do. You really do need a CV still. And I know it's crazy to think in this day and age we're still working off CVs, but they are bread and butter. That's what's going to get you the job. That's the first thing an employer sees. So it's really important to make sure that that CV is ready and available when you find the job you want. So it's just one click, send it. Have a cover letter. Cover letters, a lot of people think you don't need them anymore, but it just shows that you're passionate about it, what it is that you're applying for. So make sure you've got a CV. We're going to take you through how to make the CV better and up to date, and make sure you've got a cover letter. And then think about the sector you want to go into. So some are a lot harder to get into than others. So a really good example is I have a lot of people leaving college who want to become a nurse straight away. And they think that they can do a degree apprenticeship straight away to get into that. And that's a really hard thing to do. So look at the sectors. For example, if you want to be an air hostess, an apprentice flight attendant, flight attendant. That's something that's going to be available in London, but going to be really limited, for example, in the south. So think about the sector and what you want to go into. Is it the right area for you? Are there opportunities for you? Look on Google, like I mentioned. But this is all things that we can support you with as well. Next slide, Tom. Okay, so this is, bear with me, I'm going to have to make it bigger. So this is an example of a job that you will see on the apprenticeship website. So when you've typed in, like I said, mechanic, this or something similar, this is a job description. So what you'll see on the left-hand side is you've got a weekly wage. That's not the weekly wage. That is an example of what it might be. your working week, expected duration. So that's how long you will be in the apprenticeship. It's not to say that you won't be able to continue the job after the apprenticeship. That would be dependent on how you got on throughout. Gives you a start date, tells you when it was posted. So if it's been on there for a year, it might just be that it needs to be taken down. So just have a look at that. Gives you the distance and what level it's going to be. And then it gives you a really good breakdown. There are certain criteria that employers have to meet to put their job on this website. So you know that it's going to be a really detailed description of what this job is going to entail for you. And then it will tell you a bit more lower on the screen. You can't see it on this slide, but lower on the screen when you are on the vacancy, you'll see who the training provider is, where specifically the vacancy is. So it's really important when you are looking for those jobs to really read everything on the vacancy, because it's going to give you most of the information you're going to need. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to my trusted assistant, Leon, and he's going to tell you a bit more about the actual interviews, good CVs, and just how you can get that foot in the door. So thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Some really useful information and tips there. Especially, I think you hit the nail on the head about if there are any job vacancies, it might be that we can have a discussion with the employer. I think that's a fantastic suggestion. So thank you. Right. So just some basics with CVs. So it might be that some of you have done a CV before, or it might be that actually some of you have never done a CV. So you're looking for all of the basics of where to start and how to start. So a couple of what we'd consider as the fundamentals. Spelling and grammar is so important. The reason we've put so twice, it's not a spelling mistake, it's because it is very important. I think sometimes if we see a job or an apprenticeship, we get quite excited and we apply straight away. And also, I will speak on behalf of myself, when you do your own work, it's not always easy to spot those mistakes. So it's definitely worth getting maybe a parent or a friend or someone that you know, maybe a colleague if you're already in the workplace, just to have a quick proofread and see if there is any spelling or grammar mistakes, because an employer might consider it as someone who's not necessarily got attention to detail, but also it might be considered as a little bit lazy if you haven't bothered to read through your CV. So definitely do that, and definitely use the people and the resources around you. Keywords identified in the advert. Now, this is a really good one. So it might be that there's two different apprenticeships you're interested. Let's say one is digital marketing, but actually you're also interested in engineering and you're applying for both. You want to make sure that you have two different CVs, because you need to make sure they're tailored to the sector, and also based on the job description. So as Sarah's just said, when you see the apprenticeship vacancy, there'll be keywords. It's very important to try and match them in with your CV, so that you're demonstrating that you've got the relevant skills, or not necessarily skills if it's something that you've not done before, but certainly a passion or an interest. So don't necessarily always apply with the same CV. And again, I appreciate it does take time, but in the long run, it's definitely worthwhile doing. Make sure that every application is tailored, as I've just said. Now, work experience is so important. So I often say to people when they do CVs, it's very easy in your opening paragraph to say that you're organised and you're motivated and you're disciplined. I think we're all very good at saying what we can do rather than what we can't do. But it's very important that you back that up with work experience. So even if you've done something like a paper round, you might think, well, actually, that's not very relevant. But it's the discipline of being consistent, turning up on time, making sure that you're always doing the work, being efficient, maybe customer service, maybe on your paper round you speak to people within their houses. So there's all of these transferable skills across any work experience. So definitely include that, and try and highlight the skills that you feel that you've got, because a lot of those skills will be transferable in the workplace. Hobbies and interests. So again, maybe an underrated one that people skim over. Hobbies and interests doesn't necessarily mean playing Fortnite on the computer for 10 hours a day, which I appreciate a lot of you might do. It's things that you might do that actually end up being quite valuable. So, for example, if you play football, that would show to an employer for a vacancy that you maybe have good teamwork. You're active as well, which I think a lot of people that are applying for vacancies are keen to have. They want people that are active, physical, energetic. So some of your hobbies and interests might be actually really valuable to the employer. So try and tailor them and make sure they're good things, as opposed to going to the bar. That might be a hobby, but it's probably not the best thing to put on your CV. So try and find those sort of sweet spots of things that you enjoy doing, that you're passionate about, but also that you think would be quite relevant in terms of skills that you've got and things that you do. And then the last point there, any way in which you can show your personality or the skills you have, use it. So with apprenticeships, it's the same as a job. You often think that if you apply for an apprenticeship that you're just going to get it, but we live in a very competitive world, and it's very important that if you've got anything that helps you stand out, to try and emphasize that, because as Sarah said, the CV is the first thing an employer will see. So if an employer is reading through 20 CVs, it's very easy for them to all become very similar. So while it's important to have a very simple structure and layout, it's also very important to try and stand out. So anything that you've got that's a key selling point, maybe it's an award you've done, maybe it's something like you were head boy at school, all of these things that will help you stand out are definitely worth including in your CV. So I'm going to click over to the next slide. So on your screen, you've got two CV layouts. I'm going to be completely honest, I can't read all of the words on here because it's quite small on my laptop. I think the key thing here is that with a layout, I'm going to talk you through some of the basics, but you can actually access CV layouts online, which is probably a really good starting point. So rather than having to start from scratch on Word, sometimes you've got to add things in like lines and separations. If you go onto Google and just type in free CV layouts, it will give you a really good starting point, so you can then add in your own information. But effectively, what you want always at the top is your name, things like your address and your contact details. When you apply for a vacancy, hopefully they'll have your contact details anyway, but it's very important that you include that on there, as well as your address, so the employer knows where you're based, as that might be slightly detrimental. If you're applying for a job 200 miles away, it might make things a little bit tricky. Your personal profile is ultimately, this is the key thing. This is the first thing they're going to read, and this is where you're kind of selling yourself. But you also want to definitely apply it to things that you've done. So as I said, it's all going well saying I'm organized, I'm determined, I work hard, but everyone can write that. So in this opening paragraph, it's very important that you think about what the job is. So if, for example, it's let's say a digital marketing apprenticeship, you could say how you're passionate. You could say about some of the things that you're already doing or learning, and why you feel that a digital marketing apprenticeship would be very good for you to develop your career. So effectively, you're almost answering the question of the vacancy as to why should I have the apprenticeship and why should I be the one that gets the vacancy. So again, do feel free to big yourself up, but try and make it relevant. So back it up with evidence of things that you've done or skills that you've got. Again, you've got a couple of different sort of examples here on the right and left. Experience is then things like work that you've done. So it might be even just in year 10 doing 2-week work experience. It might be you've had a part-time job. All of that experience that helps sell yourself is worth including. So again, make it simple, just 4 or 5 bullet points. You don't need to be writing essays and paragraphs. And one thing I will say is that I've seen some CVs that are sort of 3 or 4 pages long. It's impressive if you can get that much on paper or you've done that much, but for an employer, they want simple, straight to the point. They can easily understand what you've done, where you've been, what your passion are. So try and condense it, make it specific, because people and employers, if they've got 20 CVs to read through and they're very busy, they are probably not going to read your 4 pages. So precise, specific, bullet point and to the point is exactly what employers want. Then you've got things like education. So again, GCSEs for apprenticeships, that becomes fairly important, especially with your English and maths. So try and be specific. So I remember once I put on my CV just 9 A to C GCSE levels, which was me trying to be clever, because people wouldn't know if they're A or C's. But actually, it's very important because they want the specifics of whether you've got things like English and maths. So that will help them make things a little bit clearer as well. So be specific with your education. And then again, things like achievements, hobbies, interests, and really, you probably can condense that down to 1 page, a maximum of 2. But if you see the CV layouts on Google, you'll be able to get a good idea of how they'll look. Again, we can support you more with that. So if you start building your CV and actually you want a little bit more specific information, then do let us know and we'll be able to support you. But they're the fundamentals. So as you can see, they're slightly different, but the format is pretty much identical. It's who am I, why do I want this apprenticeship and a personal profile, work experience, skills, and education, and any additional qualifications that you've got. So very simple, but the first time you do it, I can appreciate it can be a little bit overwhelming. So This is my favorite slide, and I can't take credit for building it. So the next slide is what to wear. Um,
Looks
I'm
like
not
you,
gonna.
Leon.
What's that, Sarah?
Looks like you on the left.
Yeah, brilliant. Um, I would never dress like that to an interview, only in my spare time. Um, so I won't go through, as funny as it is, I won't go through and explain why that isn't acceptable on the left. What we've done is we've effectively just said that actually what you wear and how you present yourself is very important. So I remember my dad once said to me, "You're always better to slightly overdress than underdress." So, for example, if you go for a practical based apprenticeship like engineering, I would still suggest going smart. Although you're going to be working in maybe a polo shirt and baggy trousers, it's very important that you present yourself. And I don't think you'll ever be penalised for being over the top when it comes to dress sense. So we've got an example there on the right, the difference between professional and business casual. Um, as I said, try and use your common sense, but at the same time, I would never risk anything with, oh, I'll be fine if I wear a t-shirt and jeans, because they'll be likely that someone will go smarter and they will become or seem much more professional. So please don't dress like that person on the left-hand side with a bandana, and try and replicate that more so on the right-hand side. But if you've got any more specific questions about sort of dress and presentation, then again, use the Q&A at the end or let us know by email or phone. The next slide is probably equally as important as the CV and what you dress. So body language, and body language, normally an employer will sort of make a decision on that within the first 10 seconds. So um, again, make sure you sit up straight, maintain eye contact. It's always worth shaking the hands of the employer, or if there's multiple, shake their hand and introduce yourself. Look interested and try not to yawn. If you're tired, please don't yawn. Wait for it to go over. Wait for it to finish, and then please yawn after. That's hopefully self-explanatory. Don't fiddle or fidget, which I probably have a bad habit of doing a lot. The key there, the summary of everything we've got on the slide, is remain engaged. You want to show that you're very interested and passionate. So everything with your body language has to resemble that. So if you're slouched with your arms folded, I can tell you, no matter what you say, there's a very high likely chance that employer is not going to employ you. So even if you're normally quite casual in terms of your presentation, your body language, be really passionate, be really keen, be really interested, and then you can relax afterwards knowing you've done a very good interview. So, golden rules. These are key things, and this is definitely worth adding in because some of them might seem basic, but a lot of people forget to do these. Put your phone away and make sure it's definitely on silent. There's nothing worse than an employer asking you a question and your phone, and maybe you've got a stupid ringtone like Crazy Frog. I don't know what kids do these days. If that goes off, that's not going to go down well. So put your phone away, make sure it's on silent or turned off. Preparing questions is such a valued tool, and these might be ones that you've actually prepared, or it might be that things you've thought of during. So things like the culture of the company, the job role. It might sound a bit of a cliche, but a classic one that I think is really good because you don't necessarily get the exact answer in the interview is what would a typical day look like, and that shows one whether it's right for you. And another thing I'm going to say when it comes to interviewing is it's also about making sure that the company is right for you rather than just the other way around. And I think if you can get that approach in your head beforehand, it can certainly relax you, because sometimes I think you can go into an interview, I don't know if you'd agree, Sarah, and you feel quite sort of vulnerable and that you think it's very much one way. But at the end of the day, this has got to be a right fit for you with an apprenticeship. So you want to make sure that actually the job is right for you, the culture is right for you. So having that mindset can definitely relax you, that actually it's not just them deciding whether you're the right fit, it's also vice versa. That can definitely relax things. Practice. Oh, sorry, I've missed that one. I'll go back up. Research. Especially for apprenticeships, it's very normal for people to open the question of, can you tell us a bit about what we do or who we are or why have you applied for us? Please don't say it's the salary. You want to try and know some key information about the company as to what they do, maybe things where they're based, when they were founded, and you're not expected to know everything. So I don't expect you to know what their turnover was or how much staff they've got, but do some research before and go in with a sort of clear vision as to what you do know and what you understand about the company. Because as an employer, they will see you as someone that's made effort, someone that's passionate about the company, and someone that's actually willing to spend their time research on the company as opposed to just rocking up for the interview. Practice, definitely worth doing. So maybe you've got a best friend or your parents, someone that can ask you some questions that you think are likely to be covered. It definitely prepares you. I've had the odd interview, and Sarah will vouch for me, where you're thrown off at the start. So preparation is definitely important, and it gives you a good insight as to whether or not you feel your answers are going to be strong enough in the interview. And hopefully you'll get that feedback from your friends or your parents as well, and they can have that relationship where they say, these things are great, maybe these things you need to work on. Get your personality across, massive one. So if you think about it logically, whether it's an apprenticeship or even a job, they've already bought into what you do and what skills you have because they've seen your CV. So if they've looked through 20 CVs and they're interviewing 5 people, the key is not necessarily always going to be what qualifications you have over the other candidates. It's going to be, are you going to fit in with the team? What's your personality like? What are you going to bring in terms of teamwork? Are you going to be the sort of person that creates a positive environment for everyone? So actually, in your interview, as well as everything else being important, bring out your personality, and you should always be true to who you are. Um, Within reason, me and Sarah probably toned that down when we interviewed for this job, but you always want to give an overview of what you're like, because it's very important, again, that you work in an environment where you feel you can be yourself, you can be expressive, you can be happy, and that you also have a good team ethic and sort of bond with those that you work with. And lastly, talk, communicate, and answer questions as best you can. There is nothing wrong with pausing for a couple of minutes, which I definitely agree with. You don't want to sort of waffle on too quickly. And I think sometimes if you don't take that quick breath or thought, it's easy to answer something and afterwards you sort of sit there and think, oh no, like I should have said this. There's no rush, and there's no harm in even saying to an employer, are you happy for me to come back to that question at the end, if you really can't think of anything and you're sort of thrown off, because that shows confidence in the willingness to ask that politely, but it also shows, and it means that as you get more confidence throughout the interview, you might be able to answer that question better towards the end. So be relaxed, be confident, and as I said, there's no harm in sort of taking your breath. They're not expecting you to know every single answer immediately ready. So take your time, relax, and feel free to take your time with things. So there's a few amazing resources. So Amazing Apprenticeships is a good one that we're very familiar with in our job. You've got the National Careers Service and also Youth Employment. There's some great resources out there. What we've tried to do today is just sort of streamline it and kind of strip back to the basics and make it very relevant to apprenticeships. But there's other accessible information out there, so definitely worth looking on those links. And you will have access to download this presentation. So rather than having to write them down, you should be able to copy and paste that link or click on that link and it will take you straight through. So that's effectively the end of the presentation. Me and Sarah are going to give everyone a couple of minutes for the Q&A. Sarah, I suggest maybe if you answer questions on apprenticeships, and then I can cover stuff to do with the CV and the interview skills, so it's as we were in the presentation. All questions are welcome. So Sarah's obviously covered a really interesting few slides about apprenticeship. So if you want questions more about the apprenticeship side of things, then fantastic. If you've got questions on CV specific stuff and interview skills, then I will answer that. The Q&A button, hopefully you'll be able to see. Tom Anders has put ask any questions in here, so you should be able to see exactly where those questions go in. And me and Sarah will do our best to answer them. Sarah, what we do is we give sort of 30 seconds just for people to put questions in and we can prepare. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just remember, when you are applying for a job and when you're going for an interview, you are essentially hoping that this employer is going to invest in you. They need to have a reason why they want to invest their time and essentially their money and their trust in you. So just think about that when you go for an interview, because preparation and just making yourself look like you are really invested in this job will make an employer invest in you. You have to sell yourself, which is a weird concept when you're thinking about just applying for a job, but you are. You are essentially selling yourself. What can you bring to this employer? Why would this employer want you over 5 other people that I've interviewed? So really think about why they would want to invest in you and bring that to the table. That would be the key advice I think we could give.
Amazing. Sarah, I've noticed we've got a couple of questions. The
Yeah.
first one is related kind of to work experience and CV, so I'll happily go ahead with that one.
Okay.
So Matthew has put, what if I haven't done work experience either because I didn't get myself organised or because it got cancelled because of the COVID thing? I'm going to guess this is kind of relation to, are you going to be struggling with the application because other people might have work experience? The key thing to know with apprenticeships is it's very much about new skills. No one going into an apprenticeship is expected to have done the job before. Some employers might prefer it, but actually, some employers might want to mold you. They might actually want someone in that is passionate, is keen, is hungry, but doesn't necessarily have the skills or the work experience. So I would say don't panic. Don't think that that's going to make things really difficult for you. And when it comes to building your CV and your interview, it might be that you've got other skills that are relevant. So rather than work experience practically, it might be that you've helped someone in your family in the summer with their practical based jobs. So try and just use the skills you've got and make it more about your passion, your attitude, and your personality. And they will buy into that at the interview, and they won't be too concerned as to whether you've got work experience or not. And I think Sarah hit the nail on the head. It's much more about why are you different, and a lot of people are going to have work experience, but it will really come down to, is this person enthusiastic, are they passionate, can we see them working within the company, and are they going to be here in the long run, because people want people that they feel that they can invest in and that are going to be there for the long term. So that would be my advice. So don't panic. As a summary, these things happen and you can't always guarantee you've got work experience, so don't panic.
Yeah. There's always volunteering opportunities as well. You know, if you are concerned about it, get out there and do some volunteering, because there's nothing better. When I've interviewed, looking on CV, when you see someone has invested their time for nothing in terms of monetary value, it really sort of makes you think that individual is keen. But if you're in a position where you can try and do some volunteering, even if it's in a week in a retail charity shop, go for it. But like Leon said, don't panic about it, because it is not the be all and end all when it comes to applying to an apprenticeship. Okay, so we have a question. Oh, 2 seconds. It's just. So someone has asked, for CVs, can we add a photo of ourselves? This would be very appropriate for front-facing roles. There are differing opinions on this. I would absolutely say you don't need to add a photo to your CV. We live in an age where if someone needs to know what you look like, you can immediately type their name into social media and they will find out what you look like, which is why it's very important as well, while we're on the subject, that if you are applying for a job and your social media isn't private, to make sure that you look as respectable as possible on your social media. But when it comes to pictures on the CV, I would say no, because it's one, it shouldn't be down to what you look like. Two, you don't know if the picture that you've put on your CV is appropriate, and it might actually end up giving the wrong impression of you. So my advice would be, take those pictures off the CVs. I know it's really tempting in the world we live in at the moment, but it's not needed. I don't know if you want to put your point across there, Leon. What do you think?
No, I'd completely agree, and I think some companies will maybe do a bit of research on things like LinkedIn. I'm not necessarily saying that you need to create an account on there, but I would say that it's much more about what's on there, your presentation, and if you feel that's a strong element in terms of your body language and how you come across, and the fact that you're, quite smiley and you seem quite approachable. Those things will definitely come at the interview. So I would say for now, I think it's more of an Australian thing that's happening at the moment. I don't think it will move that way, and I would think that actually it's not worth the risk, because some employers will be very anti that. And you could possibly spoil an application with a very good CV that you've done, and some really good work experience and skills that you've got. So it's a really good question, very good question, but I would say for now not to worry, as Sarah said. Sarah, I don't know if you notice these questions are coming at interesting time frames, so we'll make sure they're all covered, but it might be in a slightly different order. Josie has put, do we have to put our age on our CV? You don't have to. I know for a fact that I haven't got mine on mine, and the reason being is that when you go through an application, sometimes there's questions that they'll ask you based on things like your nationality. They'll also ask your date of birth or your when you were born and what age group at that point. And again, it's similar to what Sarah said about the picture. People might have a rough idea of who's going to be the right team fit in terms of experience, but you wouldn't want to necessarily, or have an employer saying, oh, we don't want that person because they're only 18. And it's not essential in the CV, and it's not going to be the key thing as to whether you get an interview or not. So I would say, again, we're not sort of telling you exactly what to do, but I would say for now, again, you can leave that off. The essential information about who you are things like name, your address, your email, and your phone number. And then again, all the things we said in regards of skills, education, work experience, etc. But again, really good question. Would you agree with that, Sarah?
Yeah, 100%. It's not a requirement to put your date of birth on your CV. The only time, for example, in apprenticeships, it's going to be a question is when it comes to funding, and that's not really a decision that you would make as the applicant anyway. So don't feel obliged to put your age on your CV at all. It's not essential. Okay, so someone's a follow-on question from my voluntary comment. So someone has said, where's the best place to get voluntary work, bearing in mind the present situation regarding COVID-19? That's a really good question, because I can imagine you all sort of thought, all right, well, volunteering would be great, but I can't do that right now. You absolutely can. There are lots of opportunities at the moment where people are incredibly isolated and unable to get any contact with anyone. So you can be a volunteer from home, for example, calling people, giving them support, giving them some company. You can volunteer to help take their shopping. There are many things you can do at the moment. When it comes to, for example, if you wanted to volunteer for an animal shelter, collecting items for them and taking them to the animal shelter, there's a quick Google search, you'll see how many charities and volunteer organizations are screaming for help at the moment. So if you are at home thinking, I don't have any work experience and I'd like to help someone by volunteering to also benefit myself, it's still a possibility. Don't rule it out.
Definitely. Right, we're getting some good questions here. So the next one, Pavlos, good morning. Is it possible to tell me some questions of interview questions? To be honest with you, there's probably a lot of resources on Google's if you search practice interview questions. The reason I say that is I could probably name about 50 questions that I've been asked over the years. I think to answer your question, give you something of value now, the key things you're asked are things such as, tell me about yourself. So you're bringing out your personality. Tell me about a time that you've done something creative, something you're proud of, a time maybe where you were challenged and things were difficult. So it really taps into who you are as a person and what experience and real life examples you've got. But again, there are some brilliant resources, and I would say if you go into an interview, just try and maybe think about sort of several questions you're going to be asked, just so you've got a rough idea of what you're getting yourself into. I don't ever think I've been asked questions that are completely out the norm. And that's the great thing about doing some research before on sort of normal interview questions. And I think the key thing to reply to here, Pavlos, is that employers aren't necessarily trying to catch you out. I think sometimes you go for an interview and you sort of feel under pressure that they're trying to catch you out and ask you difficult questions and make things difficult. They're not. They're just trying to find out who you are and make things actually easy as you as possible. So try and go into the mindset of thinking that they're just going to ask you questions to find out a little bit more about who you are and what you've done. And I don't necessarily think you need to overcomplicate it much more than that. Would you agree, Sarah?
Yeah, I'd agree. The main advice I give anyone when applying for apprenticeship is, before you panic about questions, is write down and really have a think 3 key strengths about you and 1 weakness. Because if you can name 3 things off the top of your head that you're not even having to think about that are your key strengths, then you are selling yourself very quickly. And then something you want to work on. So, you know, if you're sort of panicking, thinking I've got to learn all the answers to these questions, do some research, but also just really, really think about 3 key strengths and a weakness. And put that in your pocket as something that you can take to every interview. That would be my advice, is on top of what Leon just said.
Amazing. Sarah, I'll just quickly take Josie's, because Josie's just put a follow-up question here about the age and the CV, which we can both cover. Josie, no problem for answering your question. In regards to you've maybe got a little bit more experience, that's, I think, very similar to mine. I've got quite a few jobs that I haven't necessarily put on my latest CV, and the reason being is that you want to try and condense it down and make it specific, either on that one page or two maximum. Try and make those jobs as relevant to the one that you're applying for as possible, if that makes sense. So, for example, if you're applying for an apprenticeship and there's 8 jobs that you've got, it might be you don't actually necessarily need to include one of your first ever jobs that didn't require as much in terms of skills or customer service or knowledge that you may have done more recently. So I would say maybe pick 4 or 5 that you think are most relevant, and then again that might be something you discuss at your CV. So if they say name a time where you've done something, they've already seen your CV, so it might be worth then applying one of the other great things that you've done. But I would say try and make it as specific and relevant as possible. So don't worry about leaving a couple of out. And if you do think that that leaves gaps, so for example, if you're sort of then saying, well, actually, it looks like I haven't worked between 2012 and 2013, you could always put something below, just saying additional work experience upon request. So the employer knows that you have maybe got a couple of other bits that you either can discuss at the interview stage or even ask you beforehand. So don't panic, just focus on those 4 or 5 key elements, I would say. Sarah?
Yeah, I'd agree. Don't worry about your age or what you're applying for. They're legally, they're not, no one's allowed to ask you your age. So don't panic about, I know you mentioned in the comment that you're slightly older. Don't worry about it, because apprenticeships are for all. And if they ask you your age, that might not be the right job for you anyway. But everything Leon just said, absolutely spot on.
Sarah, do you want to take Seema's one about criminal record?
Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry, I missed that one.
That's right.
So, declaring criminal record. That's a really difficult question to answer, because obviously, I don't know what potential individual's criminal record would be. It would be subject to the role. So let's give an example: childcare. So if you are applying for a childcare apprenticeship, before you can be left with any children, for example, you have to go through a DBS check. And what that is a complete background check on your criminal history. So if you, for example, know there's something in your past that's going to come up on your DBS check, I would say that to your employer before they get it, because honesty is always the best policy. And if it's something that will pop up and you're worried about it then harming the fact that you've got this apprenticeship, why not speak about it beforehand, and then you're not going to have any nasty situations afterwards. So if it's something that you're comfortable with and you know it's going to affect your role or it's going to pop up, then honesty is the best policy. If it's completely irrelevant and you don't necessarily have to have a DBS check and it's just something that happened in your past that was silly and not relevant, you don't necessarily need to tell everyone about it. So if you were in a fight as a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old, and that ended up being your criminal record, and you're now 27 and you're going for an administration role, you might not need to tell someone that. If it is going to affect your apprenticeship and you are going to be at some point checked, or you just want to be honest, then honesty is the best policy, would be my advice. Obviously, there's different levels of criminal records, so it's definitely subject to the individual. If anyone has a specific query, please do ask us. It will pop up hopefully with the questions, or you can leave your email address with us and we can answer specifics, because it will be a case-by-case basis. I don't want to blanket give you an answer, but if it's going to affect the apprenticeship, honesty would be the best policy first, I would say. Leon, what do you think?
Amazing. I don't necessarily think there's much else to add. I think honesty is definitely the best policy, and also try, and I know it might be difficult, but try and really relax when it comes to the interview, because as I said, that's not going to be necessarily make or break. And it'd be a real shame to worry too much that you don't necessarily go for the interview because you're concerned. As Sarah said, it might be that it doesn't actually need any consideration if it's very minor and existing and not showing up on your DBS. So try and relax. And as Sarah said, it's something that you might have to be honest about at some point, but don't worry about that before the interview stage. Seema, very good question. How useful is a covering letter? A covering letter is so valuable, and one of the key reasons why is sometimes you apply for a job or an apprenticeship and the cover letter is optional, and this is almost a trick or a test for the employer to say, are you actually bothered in doing one. And I know a lot of employers for apprenticeships and normal vacancies, they really want to see whether people are willing to put the time and the investment in. And I will put my hand up and say, years ago, I remember I just used to apply for a job and I would dismiss the covering letter because I didn't have to. But I then thought afterwards, well, hang on a minute, if someone has spent the time and the effort to give a covering letter, that's going to make them stand out more. And it's going to show that they were perhaps more passionate and interested in the role than me, which wasn't necessarily the case, but to them, that's what they would have maybe sort of assumed in their head. So a covering letter is definitely worth doing. And in terms of what to include, is very much linking why you want the job, and it's probably worth naming the company in the cover letter as well, because that then shows that you've spent the time to write a specific cover letter for that role. So again, you can find really useful templates online on Google, but effectively a cover letter might say, dear Sarah, madam, emailing in regards to the vacancy advertised for such and such, maybe a couple of lines as to why you think you would be ideal for the role, maybe that you're passionate, a couple of skills, etc. Sign off, kind regards. So it's very simplistic, but it'll help you stand out, and it's very much tailored to that job role, whereas your CV is much more generic about what you've done in terms of skills. So definitely spend 5 or 10 minutes doing your cover letter, and then each time you apply for a new vacancy, whether it's an apprenticeship or a job, you can then just go into Word and just tailor it and change it based on what that job role is.
Sounds good.
Sarah, how are we getting on?
Good. I think we've gone through all the questions, but our trusted assistant, Jamie, who has kindly messaged us saying there's a website, if anyone is interested in volunteering, there's a website with a collection of latest volunteering jobs on there, and it's called doit.org. So if anyone is worried about that work experience or just actually wants to volunteer in this sort of time that we're all going through, check out doit.org. So thanks, Jamie, for that.
Sorry, just on Josie's asked a very good follow-up question. Do we need a covering letter if they have asked for an application which asks why would you be best suited for this role, as covering letter would be very similar? Very good. I would still definitely fill in that section and make them slightly different. The reason I say that is in a why would you best be suited for this role, you're going to be able to be a little bit more specific. So Josie, I know you said that you've got some work experience already. In your covering letter, as you see on the template, if you download one, it's much more, I'm extremely interested in this role. I'm currently available to work. I'm extremely passionate about learning in X or Y or developing in X or Y. Whereas why would you be best suited would be, as Sarah said earlier, really tapping into and answering what is your key selling point? What is it that's great about you? And what is it that's going to be a massive benefit to the employer? So it's a really good question because you don't want to be duplicating information. But I would say definitely still do the covering letter, even if you're asked that question, and just make sure that there's no real overlap, so you're not sort of copying and pasting that information. But a really good question, Josie, so thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant.
I think.
Any final questions?
Yeah, here's the last chance. I think that's everyone.
Again, if we do sign off the Q&A and you suddenly think, oh, I wish I'd asked that, again, our email details are on this presentation. I think one person did ask, which came through in the middle somewhere, was, are we going to have access to this presentation? I can't see it anymore. The answer to that question is yes, you will have access to this presentation. So some of the links that we've mentioned about are on there, and also our emails there at the bottom. So if you've got any follow-up questions in regards to any of the information to do with the presentation, or just anything in general to do with CV and interview skills or apprenticeships, then please do so. Anything else to sign off with, Sarah?
I'll just say, I think you can book a session with us. I don't know if that's going to pop up at any point. If it doesn't, we will share it on our social media, but you can book in a session with us. We're still working from home. So if you need a half an hour chat, just a bit more in-depth advice, specific answers to your questions, rather than sort of broader answers like we're giving today, you can book a session with us. But if it doesn't pop up, which I don't think it's going to, check out our social media, like Leon said.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the great questions. Had some really good stuff there. We will be doing another one on Thursday. So if you want to join, although it'll be the same presentation, there might be different questions. Or if you've got maybe some friends or work colleagues or people in your family that you think would be able to gain some valuable knowledge from them, please let them know. Josie, you're very welcome. Not a problem. Anything else you need, let us know. But Sorry, go on, Sarah.
And Sue said thank you.
She did. Two thank yous. Thanks, Sue. But yeah, anything else you need, let us know. We're doing this again Thursday. Anyone that you think might benefit, then feel free to share the link, as we're happy to help as many people as possible. Appreciate your time. And yeah, anything else you need, then let us know.
Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.